So here we are at Christ Church, the parish church of Worthing. This is the only churchyard in Worthing town centre. The church was built in 1843 and is an outstanding example of a flint built building. As we'll see later, the flint work is interlaid in the mortar with flint flakes, and this is known as galleting, a very time consuming process that strengthens the mortar but increases the overall flinty effect. The church was built because the town was expanding. Just down the opposite end of Ambrose Place was St Paul's, but that was very much a church for the wealthy. It was a chapel of ease, and you actually had to pay to have the privilege of using the pews in the church, whereas Christ Church was open to anyone. It's sometimes referred to as the fisherman's church. It was never exclusively for their use, but certainly fishermen would have worshipped here. One of the things you notice as you stroll through the churchyard is the early age at which a lot of people died. Now, these memorials are almost exclusively to middle and upper middle class people. The poor couldn't afford to have a stone memorial that would survive to our own time, and yet when we look, for instance, this memorial here to the Wainwright family, by the time they moved from Tunbridge Wells to live at Stanmer Lodge in Worthing, and Stanmer Lodge was one of the most impressive townhouses that we had in those days. By the time they moved here, the father was already dead. We can see here that the mother died aged 76, which is a good age, but however, if we look at the other names, we've got Eliza Mary dying at the age of 53. She was a stalwart of Christ Church and did many good works. Round the corner here, Matilda Ellen, aged only 30, and then finally Augusta Emily, who died aged 39, and we don't necessarily know what they died of. It certainly wasn't childbirth. It may have been infection. It may even and somehow be linked to what we'd call depression, referred to in the Victorian times as melancholy. So if we just carry on through the churchyard, you can see many memorials have worn very poorly over the years, have eroded away, and the inscriptions can no longer be read. Others that have had ornate railings, the railings were cut down during the Second World War, when metal was needed, or ostensibly needed, for the war effort. Some of the names here are linked to the town forever through street names, Farncombe, the Duffields, and a poignant little reminder here of infant mortality. Edward William Ballett Fletcher died November the 8th, 1881, aged 9 months. It almost seems poignant beyond words that a child with such an impressive name lived such a short period of time. And infant mortality was something that Victorian families came to accept almost as an inevitable part of bringing up a family. So this is the gallatine I was referring to, the flint flakes placed into the mortar between the larger flint nodules, and this is done to strengthen the mortar, and it was effective because if you look around this building, there's no sign of the larger flints falling out, whereas often with flint built buildings, over a period of years, unless constant maintenance takes place, the mortar starts to crumble and the flints fall out, and then the whole building is in jeopardy. And with something of this size, that was a danger they wanted to avoid. There's quite a lot of fairly well-to-do people buried in the churchyard, but I guess he was the most famous in his own time. This is John Turtle Wood, the explorer, the man who rediscovered Ephesus. And like a lot of the people buried in the churchyard, he came here later in life. So the old adage, people come to Worthing to die. So he did all his exploring and his adventures lecturing, and then he settled down in Worthing. But he was a great character of the Victorian period. Okay, so where is the oldest surviving piece of graffiti in Worthing? Now perhaps you know of some graffiti that goes back to the 1970s, scrawled on the back of a public convenience somewhere, but you probably wouldn't know of any graffiti that goes back to 1845. But if we look here, clearly scratched onto the stone is a name and a date. The date is 1845. So this church would have only been open 2 years then, so someone still thought it was a good idea to plant their identity on the side of the church, and it's still here 170 years later.